that the mayor and his team, all the other folks in Southwest Louisiana, and certainly the folks here working at the state level, are doing everything we can to push this recovery as fast as possible. Today is a step in that direction. So Mayor Hunter and I are happy to announce an $11.3 million housing program that will help some Lake Charles residents who are still recovering from those natural disasters that I just mentioned. This is a beginning. This is a first step, a relatively modest step, but it is one that has been made possible because of the persistent efforts of Mayor Hunter, but also folks at the Louisiana Housing Corporation, Office of Community Development, and in partnership with Housing and Urban Development out of Washington. The funds will be used for two programs. The COLC Home Rehabilitation and Recovery Program, which is intended to address unmet needs and to assist low to moderate income households, and also the City of Lake Charles Small Rental Rehabilitation Program, which will provide financial assistance in the form of grants. The focus will obviously be on homeowners who are low to moderate income, and in fact 80% or less of the area median income. These are the people who are most in need, obviously, and have the hardest time effecting a robust recovery. We recognize, as I mentioned, this is not enough. A few weeks ago, we were given notice by HUD that of the appropriation that Congress made for 2020 storms, that right around $595 million had been made available to Louisiana for those 2020 storms, and obviously this is for recovery from Hurricanes Laura, Delta, and Zeta, the vast majority of it for Southwest Louisiana. We appreciate that assistance, but we have to acknowledge at the outset it is insufficient for the type of recovery that we all expect to be able to deliver. Again, especially as it relates to housing, but there are some mitigation needs in there, and there's also an opportunity, if the CDGB funds are sufficient, to allow those funds to be used for non-federal match obligations, which are critically important on the public assistance piece, which is money provided by FEMA in response to the storm, and potentially with respect to the hazard mitigation grant program as well. So last week we were in Washington making the case in the House and in the Senate, Republicans and Democrats certainly working with our congressional delegation, but also at the White House to let them know that additional funding would be required. And then later last week I had an opportunity to have a phone call with Secretary Fudge of Housing and Urban Development. Again, thanked her for the assistance, but told her we needed considerably more funding, and of course we've been pushing for this funding literally since a few weeks after the hurricanes hit last year. And I'm confident, by the way, that additional assistance will be made available. Exactly what that time frame looks like, how much, and what the instrument will be, I can't tell you yet, but I have yet to talk to anyone in Congress or at the White House in the administration who's not in favor of additional assistance. I know that the people of Lake Charles have endured one disaster after another. I know that they're tired. As good and resilient as they are, they're probably being tired of being talked to about resilience too, right? So it's good to be able to announce something positive today and to, again, recommit to getting the additional assistance that they need. So this should be a signal of hope and not construed as mission accomplished, because certainly that is not the case. And so we do have Mayor Hunter here. He's going to come up and talk more about the program, and at the conclusion of that, we'll be happy to answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon, everyone. Just as a recap, the Governor discussed some of the weather events that have befallen Southwest Louisiana over the last year and a half, and no community, quite frankly, in recent history has waited longer for supplemental disaster aid, nor, when the first tranche finally came, had a smaller allocation for what has actually befallen us. All that being said, however, at this stage in the game, we've got to acknowledge when we have some wins. And the announcement today, the dollar amount, is a smaller dollar amount than the $595 million that the governor was talking about a moment ago. And I think it's important we distinguish that that is a separate pot of money and a separate allocation from what we're announcing today. Today's announcement is a smaller amount. However, I've just got to give a little history as to how we came to this $11.3 million announcement today. And the impetus for this was the state and the city saying that we were not going to simply just sit on our hands and wait for the federal government. And I've got to tell you, Governor, that specifically Pat Forbes in your office was very helpful. Pat Forbes put this idea on the city of Lake Charles's radar. So if anyone at HUD wants to blame anyone for us making that call and making the ask, they can blame Pat Forbes. And we got the yes from HUD, and so we appreciate that. I got to give great thanks to Louisiana Housing Corporation. Brad Swayze, the interim executive director, is here today. Anthony Morello is the current chairman of the board. I thank him. And also I thank Mayor Jennifer Vedrine. She was the past chairman of the board and was the chairman when we first started discussing this. And I remember having a conversation with her, and I appreciate those conversations with fellow mayors so much because many of them know what I go through on a daily basis. And I remember she made me feel so good one day. She said, "Nick, just calm down." She said, "In Ville Platte, when the gumbo doesn't taste good, they blame me." And so, I said, wow, that really doesn't make me feel good because that's kind of the way I feel sometimes in Lake Charles. So she made me feel good, and we would not be here today if it were not for Louisiana Housing Corporation and the state of Louisiana. I cannot thank these partners enough. I thank Secretary Fudge and President Biden. We would be honored to have Secretary Fudge visit Lake Charles, by the way, and hopefully see some of the need that still exists. I thank our Southwest Louisiana congressional delegation. They have supported this effort. And I will end by saying again that, Governor, we appreciate your continued efforts for Southwest Louisiana. I think everyone in this room and every elected official in Louisiana probably realizes that the first allocation from the federal government for supplemental disaster aid is not what we wanted. It's not the number that we wanted. It certainly didn't come in the time frame that we wanted it. However, I think we have to acknowledge when we do have support. And today we are seeing some support for Southwest Louisiana and Lake Charles, and we are appreciative of that. And Governor, specifically to you, I want to say that over the last year and a half, I've had a chance to see you work with both sides of the aisle. And it should not be a rare statement. It should not be a rare statement to have elected officials who are willing to sit down with anyone from any political party and any political background or ideology if they know that that individual can help. And I have seen our governor do that time and time again. And it shouldn't be a rare thing, but unfortunately, in this day and age, sometimes it is. So, Governor, I will end by thanking you and your administration. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay, so if you have a question, you can ask it of me or the mayor. Just let us know. Melinda?
This, can you break down what money's coming from the state, what money's coming from
Yeah,
the city?
so $5.3 million in funding is coming from HUD. That'll be Community Development Block Grant funding, and it will flow through the Louisiana Office of Community Development. He was talking about Pat Forbes. Pat Forbes runs that office for us. On top of that, the city of Lake Charles has committed $1.3 million in home funds and another $700,000 in CDBG. And then the Louisiana Housing Corporation has committed $3 million in home funds and $1 million in National Housing Trust Fund program funds. So this is putting together several different pots of money in order to come up with the total of 11.3. But it's going to, I think, and the mayor and I were just talking about this, there's already a program manager at the city of Lake Charles selected. We believe that this funding will be available sooner than even the $595 million that has been appropriated and allocated, because we don't yet have a Federal Register notice from HUD on that money, and that has to come out. That could be as late as January the 15th, and then we submit an action plan, which we will do as soon as we possibly can. Once that's approved, then there'll be a line of credit established and that money will be available. The good news here is that the 11.3 million we're talking about today should be available sooner than that. Yeah, so I'm going to let the mayor, the city's going to administer this program. The state will not.
So thank you. We wanted to make this announcement today because these things become public, and we wanted to make sure and control the messaging of what was happening. I don't have the exact answer for that yet, but certainly we will be releasing that information as soon as we regroup with our program manager. We are hoping not to create a brand new phone number. We're hoping to use an existing phone number, perhaps one that one of our local nonprofits is already utilizing. Also to help with case management. We realize a lot of these individuals that need help rehabbing their homes also need other help, and we don't want to work in silos. So to be determined on the exact phone number, but if we can utilize an agency's phone number or an existing phone number that can help connect people with other services, we want to take advantage of that as well. The housing situation in Lake Charles is absolutely dire over a year post-Laura. And quite frankly, even if we had a commensurate and equitable response from the federal government, it's hard to move quickly on rebuilding housing. Housing is a very complicated issue. However, this is going to help. The money that the governor discussed a moment ago, the extra $595 million, is going to help a lot of homeowners and a lot of low to moderate income individuals. But to answer your question of who is it going to help, it's going to help those who need it the most. We're going to start out with low to moderate income individuals, and that is our goal, those who are underinsured or uninsured.
Yeah, just going to follow up, are these some folks who were maybe denied by FEMA? I know there's been a lot of frustrations around that before, and now IDA as well. So is that what you're seeing?
So if someone received a FEMA award, they can still apply for this program. In many instances, those FEMA awards were not enough to really reestablish themselves in healthy, sustainable housing. We feel like this program is going to help fill a gap. There is a cap of $50,000 per household. So if someone did receive a FEMA award and it wasn't quite enough to reestablish themselves in their homes, they can certainly apply for this program.
Fund like Section 8 housing or any of that?
So the governor mentioned that there's $1 million, and that is going towards rental housing. And as long as the owner of that property agrees to sign on to a CEA that says that they will rent out to low to moderate income individuals, they can use some of those funds to rehab that housing.
It's up to $50,000, or is there a minimum amount, or
For
is
the
there?
rental?
So it's a $50,000 cap per household, and I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you about if there's a minimum amount.
So I apply for what I need up to $50,000, and then you all decide.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We will have an inspector that'll go out to the house and inspect it, make sure that it's actually meeting the criteria. And then the program manager that we hire will help vet those individuals to make sure that they meet the criteria that's set by HUD.
If I have $100,000 worth of damages, I get $50,000 up there, and then wait for the.
You can still apply. $50,000 is the max, but certainly if you have other nonprofits or other sources of revenue that you want to add towards that to rehab the house, you can use those funds. Yes.
Thank you. So we've not changed the way we've calculated unmet needs since the beginning. And the sum of it is that in addition to the $595 million that has been allocated out of the 2020 appropriation by HUD for Louisiana for 2020 storms, we still need another $700 million or so. Just to point out why, I think it bears saying that when Hurricane Laura hit last year, Lake Charles was the city in the country of its size with the lowest unemployment rate in the country. And because the employment situation was what it was, there was already a shortage of housing there, especially affordable housing, workforce housing, which is really what we need to get people back in their homes, but also to make sure that we have a robust recovery. And so we have the $595 million that's been allocated. If you remember, we've always said we have $1 billion in unmet need for housing in Southwest Louisiana. So the 595 is short of that. But in addition to that, of the $595 million, more than $89 million has to be spent on mitigation efforts. And it won't be available for the general housing program. And then if you wanted to allocate some CDBG funds, as the language in the appropriation out of Congress allows, to pay for non-federal match obligations. So for example, the 10% on public assistance, that would be another $131 million. If you wanted to pay the 25% non-federal match obligation under the hazard mitigation program, that would be another $80 million. So you're already above $210 million on those two things. And then of course you have some cost to administer the program. And so what I'm trying to tell you is, if the 595 is a good start, but it's not enough to meet the housing need if it all went to housing, and you can't even put it all towards housing based on the constraints that we have. So we've had the same number in mind. We've been communicating it over and over from the very beginning, and we believe that there's another $700 million that needs to be either appropriated or allocated out of the previous appropriation, whichever way we can get it. Hopefully we get the full amount and we get it as soon as possible.
That you're saying is still needed, that's for housing and for the matches you're talking about?
Yeah.
That's not.
Correct. So $700 million would take the whole appropriation to closer to 1.3. That's what we've always said. And because if you don't get to 1.3, you don't have the billion to spend on housing, because you do have to do mitigation work. You have to have the cost of administering the program. You do want some money, and I think the mayor will tell you the public assistance funding right now for the city of Lake Charles, or whether you're Calcasieu Parish or whichever local government entity, is very, very important as well. And you know, so there's other things that have to come out of the CDBG allocation, and other things that don't necessarily have to, but it's permissible, and we would really like to be able to do those things as well. Yes.
Governor, today,
This is an unrelated question, but today Representative Stefanski talked about redistricting and said that he has not yet heard anything from you or your office about what you would like to see out of the various maps. And so I guess I'm wondering, are you anticipating that you're going to provide the legislature with some guardrails of what kind of bills you would like to see passed in the redistricting session, or are you just going to stay sort of at the broader concepts that you've talked about? You haven't really talked about individual maps yet.
No, we haven't. And the session starts in February, so there's plenty of time for this to happen. Generally speaking, I will say again what I've been saying throughout, and that is that we want maps that are fair, where the districts aren't so irregularly shaped that you have to kind of scratch your head and wonder what's going on there. And districts, whether they're legislative maps or whether they're congressional maps or whatever, so that the elected representative isn't selecting their voters, but the voters get to really select their representatives. And then you have some legal issues too, around minority representation and making sure that it's sufficient and that you're not either packing or cracking, and those are terms of art in this. And I'm happy at any point to sit down with Representative Stefanski or anyone, and I fully anticipate doing that. But there is plenty of time to get that done. But those are the general concerns that I have going into redistricting session, which should start in early February. Look, thank you all for continuing to cover this. I suspect this will be the last time I speak to you all and to the state before Thursday. So I do want to wish everyone in the state a happy and blessed Thanksgiving. We have much for which to be thankful, even though it has been a very, very difficult last year or two. And, you know, we have a lot of people around the state. We haven't talked about Southeast Louisiana yet, but obviously we're going to be working with Congress and the administration to get an appropriation for Ida recovery in Southeast Louisiana as well. It's a lot of challenges, but an awful lot to be thankful for, and I would just ask that people have a happy and blessed Thanksgiving, and I'll be praying for that, but also a safe one. We can remember that last year at this time, we were doing relatively well on our COVID front. We went into the holiday season, starting at Thanksgiving, and people traveled in big numbers and gathered in big numbers indoors quite often. And we ended up with a COVID surge. Almost all the experts anticipate that there's another surge coming this year. I'm hopeful, given the number of vaccinations and the fact that we just came out of the Delta surge, that we won't have anywhere near that number. But there's some things that you can do to protect yourself. You can get vaccinated. You can still have those events outdoors if possible. If you're not feeling well, don't go gather with your family. You know, and if you have any questions, go out there and be tested. So there was so much more available this year that it's just not necessary to unreasonably expose others, especially the vulnerable members of your family and community, to the disease. So if someone's older, if someone has a comorbid health condition, then you know that they're more vulnerable to the disease. So please be careful. Let's get through this as best we possibly can. Today we have right at 200 people in the hospital. That's about the lowest we've had since we started keeping numbers of who's in the hospital every day, going back to March of 2020. There were 5 deaths over the weekend. That's, you know, relatively low number. Still waiting on a daily count of 0. We haven't had that yet. Percent positivity is well under 2%. And so we're doing much, much better. But there are states around the country who are being challenged more severely right now than at any other point. And this is their Delta surge. And so it can happen again here in Louisiana to some degree. So I'm just asking everybody to be careful. Let's lift one another up in prayer as we give thanks on Thursday, and also be safe as you travel. And then we'll let you know about any future press availabilities. So Mayor Hunter, thank you again for coming. I wish you a wonderful Thanksgiving as well. And everyone, God bless.